Today I am celebrating the life of Kary Mullis, a man who played a significant role in my life in the last few years, not long after his death, which preceded the lockdowns that began in 2020. He was an American biochemist who was responsible for inventing the PCR, the polymerase chain reaction, which was never intended to be a test of sorts, but a means of magnifying what we might struggle to detect by normal methods of measurement. And he was, I came to find, a beautiful, humorous man who received the Nobel Prize for Chemistry for his work. And his demeanor is utterly charming when we listen to interviews of his. And I think he's particularly worthy of note because he left behind a great deal of contextual information that really enabled me to understand some of the issues that were arising during those lockdowns. He was the guy, obviously, who invented this process, and yet he warned very vociferously of its abuse and the possibility of people misconstruing it for something that could be used for testing the presence of a virus. Because ultimately, we as organic beings are symbiotic with the entire plethora of viruses and bacteria and microorganisms that exist in this life. And he explained very clearly how if you take a sample from, I could take a leaf from a tree over there, and if I was to do a PCR process on it enough times, I would find the presence of almost any kind of virus or bacteria I could wish to imagine, because they are everywhere. And that's what we saw going on during that lockdown period, was people taking this PCR process, turning it into a test, and then multiplying the number of times that it was repeated until certain presences could be detected. Now, Kary Mullis was a man who had concerns around this and had encounters with many people that became significant names over the last few years. One of them being Dr. Anthony Fauci. And there are videos you can see where Kary Mullis talks about his interactions with Anthony Fauci in no uncertain terms, and describes him as a very dangerous character because of his lack of scientific knowledge and his desire to abuse his position. And Kary Mullis, as a gay man who had many friends that were affected by HIV, first became aware of Anthony Fauci's dubious working practices through the whole HIV, what would you call it? Some people would call it a scam. Some people would call it an epidemic. It's very difficult to know what word to use there, but he saw that was the first time that Anthony Fauci had a major role to play in something that ended up having very dubious effects and making huge amounts of money for the corporations that he was associated with. So Kary Mullis is someone who I want to give a vote of thanks to, not just for his scientific prowess, but also for his willingness to speak out honestly and candidly about the people that he was interacting with. And you know, it seems serendipitous for the likes of Anthony Fauci that he died the year before that lockdown, and you might hear in my voice a note of skepticism as to whether anything or anyone else could have had a hand in that. And maybe that's it's just one of those things of life, and that's the way things work out. But I can't help but have my suspicions aroused somewhat by the convenience of the timing for that whole thing to unfold in the way that it did. And you know, I'm aware that as I talk publicly about this, there are many people who are still very much drawn into one camp or another with regards what happened during that whole time. And I know that there are a lot of people that are experiencing vaccine regret, and you know, there's no doubt from the statistics that there are a huge number of people that are suffering as a result, not of the supposed virus, but the treatment of it. So I don't want to talk about this in any way that may be perceived as frivolous, because the scars of those years of 2020, 2021, 2022 are being felt still. Those wounds are not fully healed for, I would argue, almost anyone. My young children have been deeply affected by it in terms of the amount that they were able to access, let's call it a normal life. And I mean, my children were fortunate enough to be surrounded by a good amount of family and friends to be able to not witness the difference to our society so profoundly. And yet, I mean, I'm certainly in contact with many, many young children who really are carrying visible scars as a result of being secluded from the world, confined at home. I mean, my partner is Spanish, and in Spain, children were literally locked at home. They could not leave the house for months. And it causes a shiver in me just to think of that and the effect that that had. So today, I'm honouring Kary Mullis. Thank you for the role that you've played in our lives and your willingness to speak out, which is a common theme amongst the people that I'm honouring here. So in the quiet of the woods here, a thought going out to Kary Mullis. Thank you.